All right, I'm gonna try a different approach. I'm not gonna do a live. I'm going to do a pre-recorded message. And the pre-record, I'm going to post it. Yes. So what was I talking about? Interviews. Yes, interviews. I am presently in the market of getting back into the classroom, teaching again. I've received several interviews, personal interviews, walk-in interviews, you say, call-in interviews, to get back into the teaching arena. Because yes, there is a teacher shortage. As much as people don't want to talk about it, when I left teaching 2021, right after COVID, post-COVID, they tried to get me back in the DOE, and they were like offering all kinds of stuff. Like, hey, you can come back in. We're gonna offer you paid. You want a sub, but the only thing is I had to get the, and I'm like, no, no. So that being said, even though the system is weird, because after a lot of my former colleagues, friends, what you call them, professional co-workers were in the system, and no judgment, people had to do what they had to do to survive. It wasn't going to work for me because of other health complications and not knowing what the side effect is. And now that we know what the side effects is, but I want to talk too much about that. I just want to talk about this interview process. My experience has been. I'm finding that it's so funny that I'm getting these calls once I started to put my resume out, that people are looking at my qualifications, they're looking at my credentials, and they're like, wow, very impressive, and coming for an interview, and we can do a phone interview. Sure, no problem. But there's also a bit of a variance of what they want to pay people. I find that it's weird because now with these new systems in play in which you create an online application through their portals, through their systems, it's weird because it's redundant. Like they want you to use your resume and update your resume, and they have all these new AI bots that scan the resume, and you put that in, or you could manually do it. And after you go into their system, depending what school network you're in, or district, whatever it is, it's weird because you would think these automated systems that would use AI, that would scan your resume, or you post your resume or paste and copy your resume, you would think it'd be easier, 1, 2, 3. But I'm finding out that sometimes those systems are redundant. Like you go into a network of education, you put your resume in, you put up your copy of your certification, all your paperwork, and then they still ask you to do it again. Like, oh yeah, like, and I'm like, why do you need to do it twice? So it's like it defeats the whole purpose, I mean, that's a different area of discussion. I think the whole AI thing with having the AI read your resume, and I think that's all a scam. I think it's a money hacker. That's different stuff. But anyway, the interview process has gone well. I went to a couple of schools. I did a couple of demonstration lessons. And they had my credentials, they had my certification, they had my years experience, they had my resume, they had my references, they have all that stuff, and they have evaluations. You're an effective, highly effective teacher in your domain area, blah, blah, all that good stuff, which is why they reached out to me and said, hey, but I found it funny because I've had some positions available as far as Connecticut, some in New Rochelle, some in the New York area. I don't have a license in Connecticut or New Jersey, however, so to speak, which means I would have to go through the whole process of getting a dual license and then their paperwork. Some of those states, the licenses aren't transferable. Some states are. Some states you can use your New York State license. Okay, XYZ. But it also shows how really their dire need of getting qualified people. And so it's funny, that's what I get to. I've noticed in these interviews, when there is the phone interview, and of course they haven't seen me, for those who have done the phone interview or the Zoom interview, it's weird because the questions they ask to me are rudimentary. Because I've heard questions like that for over 20 years teaching. It's like, the questions are not the type of questions. I know they're routine. I know it's just for them. I know it's just for them to say, hey, we asked him or her that question, blah, blah, blah. And this is how they ask. Oh, how would you handle diverse populations? Because they read it from a script. And I get it. And so I had to break it down to my whole curriculum is all multicultural based, The degree is in educational psychology for special education, you know. So I'm coming with credentials, but it's just so funny that I find, and these what I call yellow flags for me. Yellow flags for me is that when these personnel call me, I'm always about how prompt they are with their time. If they say 10 o'clock, do they call at 10? They call at 10:05 or 10:15. Or your interview's at 2 o'clock and you're there waiting and you go through all the security checks and you're there and then they don't come see you until 2:10. You know, that's a testament of telling me how structured they are as an organization, from their office to their personnel to their administrations. Because if they schedule for you and they're not on top of it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have issues with the way they run their organization. I know it sounds crazy, but it is. You know, it's like, not all schools, and schools are private entities, I think, but some are public entities within their network. Like, they don't run like businesses. Like, the corporate meeting is at 10 o'clock, you're there at 10. If the CEO is there, you don't walk in late unless you are part of a presentation team. You coming in from, you know, Switzerland, Japan, Johannesburg, whatever. Your plane just landed and you just got there maybe 2 minutes. Yay, we apologize, you know, and the traffic in JFK, whatever. Outside of that, and I'm saying that because from an experienced, seasoned person, you know, and working at various different schools. I worked at 12 different schools in New York City. And so some schools have been awesome schools. There's some schools have been, you know, great administrative teams, good colleagues. And then sometimes you find the students are like, you know, and that's why they have to have that cohesive communication on top of each other. Otherwise the school will fall apart. Sometimes it's the students who are like very engaged, attentive. They're like, wow, we love this teacher and XYZ. And sometimes you can have the politics and the administration. It varies. But I usually have a tendency to gauge a school in this process by the way the interview rolls over. Like, I've never been put in a situation where they ask me questions that are so tough I couldn't answer, because I have the experience. And they will ask me, what about leadership? And what about that? And I expound on it. Yes, when I was an educator, I took on the position as a school leader and helping other teachers for their tenure. And we help to develop tenure binders and let them explain what is essential in your binder when you go for your tenure, what administrators will be looking for. Throw in your assessments of how effective you are as a teacher. Put in your best teaching practices through your lesson plans, XYZ. Show any of the accolades or high achievements you may have received professionally as a team member. You know, just put the stuff in. You have to pop like here's one portfolio. This is an art portfolio, right? This is my artwork. If I'm an artist, and I am an artist, and I would say, yes, and here's my work, and here's some oil paintings I created back in 2091, and here's some more of my abstract, whatever, right? So the same thing with a teacher. A teacher has to have their teacher's binder. This is my teacher's binder. You know, this is my teacher's Bible, right? That I've created in the past, oh gosh, how many years that it goes since I got my tenure. And so in here, I would have, you know, my license. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but there's my license. Oops. Copy my license. My philosophy statement. Of course, these were the state standards, but I have to update it. This is old stuff. So now that I'm getting acclimated back into the system, I have to use the current state standards. But I've always had that. Content study, for example, I incorporate vocabulary in my visual arts. So each unit of study, if it's about drawing and technology and painting and sculpting, those units of study will have vocabulary to help foster the learning. Okay? Again, these are those state standards, visual arts. This is the old stuff, but I keep it current. And there's also the Common Core with literacy, so I incorporate that, right? But that is what it is. Each educator becomes to a point where to receive a tenure, they have to be able to show documentation of why they'll be a good fit to maintain themselves in the classroom as a teacher. And then here I even have like assessments, I'm not going to bore you guys with all that stuff. But when you come with a certain amount of experience, hold that thought. I hear it bubbling. I hear it percolating. Just hold on. Just hold on. I'll be right back. What you gonna do? What you gonna say? Okay, I'm back. See? That's reverse. Born to teach. I got this cup years ago from a former colleague. It's one of those holiday gifts, Yeah, like Moses, I'm in the middle. I have to go back to teaching. Anyway, I think ideally would be works for me in this teaching, and I'll be very honest. I'm gonna put this out there. I had taken an assignment recently at a charter school. I'm not gonna mention the charter school in the Bronx. It was an assignment for 2 months. I was aware the position would be only temporary for 2 months, and then after the 2 months, we would negotiate pay of sorts. In the process of being interviewed for that former assignment at this school, they couldn't pay me. Meaning, they asked, well, what are your desired salary, blah, blah, blah. So I used my last step salary in which I was paid before I retired in the DOE. Once I put that figure in, and I say this to say, once they saw that, they looked, and then I guess the personnel of one of the people handling the application with the human resources department had a very candid conversation. It was like, oh, well, that's your salary. We can't afford to pay that. And it was in the, 6 figure, and they couldn't because of years of experience. And so I opted to say, you know what? For now, there's only a 2-month spree. We'll see how this works. We can negotiate something. You could pay me this, XYZ. And so we came with an agreement. In lieu of that, after the end of June of 2025, we would go into renegotiation to see what the salary would be. But that being the case, I wouldn't have taken the job because there's no way I would have accepted lower salary than my last previous salary. I'm not gonna go down. That what it is. And this was a charter school. And I'm going to say, with all power and respect to all those teachers who work in charter schools, their choices, XYZ. But I'm going to tell you, when they have those contracts, the stipulation, I'm going to say this in my years of teaching, and I've worked with colleagues, former colleagues, who used to work at charter schools. And I'm going to just say this in my professional opinion. I think that a lot of charter schools, there may be some good charter schools, just like, believe it or not, there are some good, it's hard to hear this, there are a few good DOE schools. But those schools are specialized schools. So you're not going to be in middle school, especially if you're at the high school level. You're not going to be in your middle school flip-flopping your way through and then try to get into a school like Bronx High School of Science, or just to give you a reference, where your average must be 90 capacity and over, And I guess with the arts, LaGuardia is a very good school. They've changed their criteria a bit ever since the COVID. I don't know why. They should have kept that restrictive, entrance, because that's why it was a specialized school. But for whatever reason, it is what it is. But long story short, this particular school, again, name won't mention the charter school, it was not. And the kids were adorable. The kids weren't the problem. It was the way the school was run. It was the way it was. And so again, I say all power to those who work in charter schools because the exorbitant hours they put in. It's like I was amazed at the lunch detail, that the teachers would have lunch detail with the students. And although they had lunch detail, like most of the teachers would have a shift, that they would have the lunch with the students and then they would have an individual time. And I was trying to figure out, and I said, did they have lunch? Me, because the way I came in to fill that position, under my agreement by contract, when I took lunch because I fell into the category we call the specials. Like myself, the music teacher, the physical education teacher, we were the specials. So we had our slew of kids, about 400, over 420 kids. But when it came to things like the lunch, my lunch was duty free. Now the DOE school is contracted. It's part of your protocol. You're supposed to have a duty free lunch. If you lose up your duty free lunch, which means your duty free lunch means you have no kids, no assignments, it's just your lunch. And then you have your preps in which you plan your classes and XYZ, parents, but your preps are really going to be designated for you doing your lessons and your curriculum planning, or you have a cohort with your teams and then you collaborate with your math teachers, whatever it is, and then you see the stems and how you can develop the curriculum, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But when I looked at this particular experience, I looked around, whenever the kids had lunch, I would see the staff had lunch with them too. If there was inclement weather and the kids could not go out, and if the kids, let's say, had a lunch and a recess indoors, the kids' resource was indoors with the teachers. So they didn't have a duty free. Maybe there were times when they would rotate, and I was trying to figure it out. I said, how did they? And that's when I knew, no, I couldn't do this. So when I'm looking at these charter schools, and they're calling me too, are they network? And I'm like, So as part of the follow up, they're calling me, hey, we saw your resume, and they asking these questions, and the questions are like, I can get the job. That's not the problem. The issue is going to be, are they going to be able to pay me with my network? My net worth is based on my years experience. And I did an interview just a few minutes ago, and I just had to reiterate with the interviewer, and I said some schools have these probational periods when they hire people, and that's how they have a tendency to try to play that thing with the numbers and how they're going to pay you. I said, but in my experience and in my credentials, I'm certified, actively certified. I have over 20-something years experience, and I gave it a whole rundown in the interview. I was effective and highly effective teacher my last few years where I taught. The last 3-4 years I've taught. And so the question is, it's the pay. I'm being honest. I mean, when I saw some of those positions, oh, you want to pay that? Okay, that's what you're going to pay. That's your cap salary. I see the low cap and I see the high cap. You're going to pay me the high cap. And so it is what it is. But especially if they calling me and also saying that they need qualified and experienced people. And so I'm right now open for middle school to high school. I've taught elementary. I'm not doing elementary anymore. People are like, oh my gosh, it's so cute, the babies. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You could do a lot more work, I think, developmental with older kids. With older kids, you can build things, with lights and stuff that glow and make noises and all kinds of artsy stuff that's science employed in it, and smoke comes out and steam. You can do all kinds of stuff. Kindergarten, nothing wrong with kindergarten. People are like, oh, no, but it's not my suit. I can't. Now with the sneezing and the boogies, and then higher probabilities of getting sick is with younger kids who sneeze and they don't know how to, they're not sanitary. They touch it, but no, not doing that. So, that being said, that's in a nutshell. I'm rambling on my mouth, but it's just funny how from these interviews, I can tell the people who are part of these hiring committees how much actual experience they have just by the way, listening to the way they read the questions, because all the questions are prompted in the interview. Oh, how can we draw without seeing? The teacher asked the students to close their eyes. I'm just reading one of my content lessons, but it's all prompted. And so they gauge how you respond effectively in case examples you can give to that. But I think it's more than just the interview, because, and one more thing about this thing that tells me a lot, with this system, online system, I applied for this network that's also associated with the DOE, but it's a different network within the DOE. The network, I'm learning, I'll do some more research, that I think ever since this whole COVID thing, the DOE has kind of, I don't want to say subsidiaries, but you got this charter school, that charter school, this charter school network, that charter school. Everybody's got charter schools. They bought into the whole idea of charter schools, and they bought into the idea, one of the most selling points of charter schools would say, wow, smaller classroom size. You have smaller classroom size because of the simple fact that a lot of kids that are pulling out of those networks going into these small schools are more scattered now. But it's only a amount of time before they become crowded. And it's just in my experience in some of these charter schools, it's not. Anyway, but my point I was making, not to get diverted from that, was again, is how the system is aligned. If I'm applying for a position in whatever, system they use to recruit, the systems are shabby, to say the least. I had, again, submitted my documents, submitted my resume for this same position going way back in August, and I haven't heard anything from this network. I resubmitted for the position that was available, and I thought, did that position get taken already? And I say, wait a minute, it's also a middle school art position. Maybe it's a different school within the network. And I applied again. This time when I applied, I got the response, the application was received. I got an email from one of the recruiters. And then with the email, I received a follow-up email. Hey, we're going to conduct the phone interview. But then it was a glitch. And it said, oh, before we do an interview, can you please fill the application? I said, I already filled the application out twice already. So I should be in your system. And then I applied specifically to your school. Sometimes when you apply in these networks, you're in their network, but you have to assign yourself to a specific school, and the administration or the hiring team will see you and then give you a call because you're in the system. I'm in the database, so to speak, But it's just interesting how when I spoke to her, I said, yes, and I had to, the hiring person, I had to, of course, professional. I'm a bit confused, please assist. On this date, blah, 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 I've already applied and submitted the application with resume, documentation, blah, blah, blah. And I had to screenshot everything else. And I had to even show her the account that's part of their network, in which I've already done so, and it's confirmed, and I'm just waiting for the interview. And then so apparently what it was I think a glitch or mistake with the email, the forwarding email. They attach it to an email, and I guess I had 2 emails in the system because I had applied before. And then she saw it. Oh, yeah. And I said, I might, if you forward it through this email, you may see. And that's why she gave me the call. But anyway, it is what it is. It just says that their system does have glitches, or there's glitches, or it's not perfect. I get it. But it's just after a while, honestly, this interview, I'm feeling like this. And it was a phone interview. I'm feeling like, she's asking me these questions. I'm like, can you please tell us that? And I'm like, how do you do diverse populations and make them feel inclusive and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, lady, my whole curriculum is designed that way. I got stuff in here in my old curriculum, and I can update. We can talk about the Tainos in South America, in Latin America, and in the Caribbean. And then, you want to talk about African Americans, we can talk about Ramir Bearden, we can talk about Archibald Motley, we can talk about a host of other African American artists, current and late. Of course, everything is always typical with the Picassos and the European, but it's a whole exclusive, or say inclusive, curriculum, because art is so expanded that you really can't confine so much of it in 1 year. And that would be another question. The sequence of the curriculum, would it be something that rolls over? And there's something that caught me that I kind of felt a little off, and that's why I had to reiterate, because their position posted would say middle school 68, and then in the interview it told me fifth grade, and fifth grade is not middle school. Fifth grade, okay, is elementary. Early childhood is K to 2. People may start to dispute that. Yeah, it is. No, it is. There it is. I have a K to 12 license. So if I design curriculum, multi-tiered curriculum, there'll have to be a K to 2 curriculum for early childhood, even pre-K. And then you have elementary from grade 3, the test in grade 3 to 5 or 6, depending on the school. And middle school can be constituted grade 7, 8, or 6 to 8, depending on the school. So when she was saying fifth, but it's a, oh yeah, it's a 5 to 8 school. And I was like, okay. And I'm just trying to get a gist of it. So, because sometimes when they post a position, you got to ask those real specific questions. They post a position, but that's not really what they're, because they don't know, And in the interview, I kind of indicated that. I said, she was asking me one point about how did I take feedback or receive feedback, and I said yes, and I gave a perfect example. It's like the obvious is that when teachers get observed, when administrators and faculty, they come and they observe your lesson and they take notes and what you've done and your management skill and your timing and how the students were engaged in the lesson and your higher order thinking, and do you have intellectual engagement and conversations, and what kind of forms of assessment do you have of students to self-assess. And I said I got my rubrics and students can see and they work in group, all that kind of stuff, blah, 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 blah. But then it's funny, I would flip it back and say, yeah, even in my experience, and I've noticed that even I used to work as a arts liaison in certain districts, and I had to bring that intel to the administrators. The administrators, when it came to the arts and the music, no, you can't grade the music teacher based on English language arts rubric. You got to have a specific music rubric if you're assessing their educational instruction or engagement. But most administrators don't know specialty areas. Most administrators are either math people, some science, English language arts. Maybe once in a while you may find an arts background, that has been learned or part of the administrative experience, But I found that sometimes I had to educate them. I had to educate them on art compliances. That, your grade in 7 and 8 have to have a certain amount of required art course of study credit hours per the year between grade 7 and 8. That's mandatory by the state for you to be in compliance. For you to get that performance score for your arts program, music programs by the state. Oh yeah, the kids have to be offered a, and it's required. If you have a licensed art teacher, you just can't call it enrichment. It has to be programmed in. Oh, but can we do the after school? No, it has to be the licensed art teacher, licensed music teacher, and I had to school them. And they try to work out your program, and they try to fabble out of your program, and your program is like not in compliant with your UFT because you're teaching 1 or 2 periods extra, and then you take it for the team. No, I'm not. If you have 25 classes, why do I have 28? Just to give you a reference. So they will always try to find that way to take the arts person and bend them, and I'll be the advocate. No, you can't do it. You need to change the program. But it's going to change the. You have to. You got to stop accommodating your friends and giving them extra preps, and you need to do this. So it is what it is. And I wasn't a troublemaker. I was an advocate and speak up. Anyway, that is what it is. So, you know. So, yes. All right, people. Peace, no chicken grease. Let me see if I can post this video at almost 30 minutes and say about 25 seconds remaining. I have a sip. Feel free to enjoy. Coming to you live, artist Kevin McDowell, professional, a.k.a. former retired art teacher going back in the system. Yes, I'm going to get back on the saddle and teach again. If I have said at the beginning of the video, there is a teacher shortage, and they do need qualified teachers. And I think there are loopholes where, if you got the people that are qualified and they can carry it, pay them. It's that simple. Pay them. Let's see how this goes. When I start asking for it, they're going to pay me this. All right, peace. No chicken grease. Have a good one, people. Be well.